The hottest debate in America has been about the relationship of police with the people they're charged with protecting. In Boston, the debate has gotten personal. In a recent tweet, the city's largest police union, the Boston Police Patrolmen's Association, targeted Boston City Councilor and mayoral candidate Andrea Campbell, who chairs the council's Committee on Public Safety and Criminal Justice. They wrote that anti-violence advocates were justifiably astonished that Campbell's committee had held up more than $1 million in grants for the police department, quote, given the recent explosion of violence in our city. In response, Campbell tweeted, "Last I checked, we were still waiting to hear from the Patrolmen's Association on why they enabled and elevated an accused child molester. Until then, don't tweet at me." That's, of course, in reference to the former head of the association, Patrick Rose Sr., who was recently charged with more than a dozen sex offenses against children. Behaviors, a Boston Globe report found that some in the Boston Police Department had known about for decades. To that tweet, the union responded, accusing her of hypocrisy, writing, quote, "If I were you when the topic of discussion turns to enabling criminals, you and your credibility would be best served by recusing yourself or tweeting at nobody." City Councilor Andrea Campbell joins me now to discuss. We also invited the president of the Boston Police Patrolmen's Association, who unfortunately declined to join us. Councilor, it's good to see you. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Jim.
This back and forth started with their criticism of you for holding up this $1.25 million in grants. Even if you don't agree with the criticism, they're fully entitled to challenge your decision-making around police funding. That's fair game, is it not?
Absolutely. That's with respect to the issues in the work. And as I've been telling folks with respect to those grants, they're still under review because I'm waiting for responses from the department about some concerns from residents and fellow council colleagues on those grants. And I have yet to receive that. Until I do, they will remain under review.
So then your response was what I said a minute ago, that you're waiting to hear what they had to say about the enabling and elevation of Rose to the position of union leadership. Their response was about you enabling criminals, I assume, and I'm sure you would agree, they're referencing your brother, who obviously has been charged with kidnapping and rape. Ayanna Pressley and many others have described their tweets to you as racist. What's your reaction to what they've had to say directed at you, Councilor?
Well, it's clearly personal, and there is a pattern here of this particular union going after electeds, including electeds of color and women electeds. And I have said from the very beginning that the work that I am doing is to ensure that our police department is the most transparent, diverse, equitable, and accountable in the nation. And I think the Rose case is just one more example that demonstrates that our department has a lot more work to do, and that I am always willing to engage any and every stakeholder with respect to the issues to ensure that we get to the place I think we all want to be, which is for our department to be the leading department in this country with respect to transparency and accountability. And also, most importantly, that we have a budget that is sustainable. And right now, that is not the case.
Can the kind of reform that you and I think others on the council support, can it happen without I don't know what's the appropriate word, a more positive relationship with the Patrolmen's Association?
Well, for me, it's going to happen no matter what. I always want to work with anyone. I have engaged every union, a whole host of stakeholders to push for reforms over the years. When I first got to the council, my first order of business was making sure that the city of Boston implemented body cameras. I showed up in court to make sure that that happened because the city made that commitment to advocates. And on the opposite side in that courtroom was the Patrolmen's Association. But there have been other instances where I've worked in partnership with that particular union to get some things done. So I'll work with anyone and everyone, but I'm not going to allow folks to stand in the way of making sure that our department is transparent and accountable to the people we serve, and that it also is one of the most diverse in the city of Boston. That requires leadership and bold leadership, and that's what I've been delivering, and I won't stop.
You didn't address, is the tweet racist? Is the leadership of the union racist in your estimation?
The tweet I have found is a pattern of how they show up, and this is the leadership. and whoever is responsible for the communications on how they show up when folks challenge them. And I have been challenging the entire system, frankly, and with respect to policing, to be more transparent and accountable, and to also push this department to do better and to think outside the box to responding to incidents of violence in public safety, for example, to address the root causes of violence. There is a reluctance to do that. There is a clinging on almost to the status quo. And I have said that that can't continue to be the case because residents are demanding that this system be more transparent and accountable. And so what I have found is that they get upset and they respond with this personal attack. For me, I don't get involved in the personal. If anything, it was disappointing. It was upsetting. And I've always been crystal clear on why I do this work of being a public servant and being an elected. It is about breaking cycles of poverty, of trauma, of criminalization, and not just for myself and my two boys, for example, but also for other families in the city of Boston.
You know, one last thing about Rose himself. We all know that 13 pages of his internal affairs investigation files were finally released, I don't know, a week or so ago, leaving, I think it's 92 pages unreleased. The argument being made that that was to protect victims. I have to say, I don't understand why more can't be released with redaction that does protect them. Having said that, are you satisfied with what was released, or is your attitude that the whole thing has got to be public?
Absolutely. And we can do that while also protecting the rights of victims, which is critically important. But if other folks in the department who have knowledge of that record and are saying that more documents can be released, I firmly believe we should be releasing that information. And we also need an external investigation into this Rose case. And I am pushing the acting mayor to enlist the U.S. Attorney's Office to do just that. And that hasn't been done yet.
Speaking of the acting mayor, does Kim Janey have the power to release the full report? And if she does, should she?
Absolutely. And there's a way in which to do that while also protecting the rights of victims, of course. But there are many folks who have said that there are documents that can be released, and they have not been as of yet.
So in the last minute, I want to turn to another thing affecting the race for mayor. Some of your supporters received a letter from Richard Taylor, former member of the Weld cabinet, an African-American developer, suggesting that you drop out of the race, run for the Suffolk DA's position, essentially to clear the field for another black woman. Obviously, that's the acting mayor, Kim Janey. What was your reaction to that?
I was disappointed. And I have no interest in running for district attorney. The only job I'm running for is the mayor, to be the next elected mayor in the city of Boston. Black women are not interchangeable. We each have our own personal story, our own record of accomplishment. Why I do this work is very distinct from every candidate in this race. My record of accomplishment in the issues I focused on, including policing reform, set me apart not just from the acting mayor, but every candidate in this race. And now my job is to get out there and share my story and my record of accomplishment with voters and to earn their support in the city of Boston.
You know, the campaign manager for Kim Janey said that this letter did not reflect the views of her campaign. Do you accept the statement by the campaign manager, or do you hold Janey responsible for this?
Well, I'm hoping that, of course, acting mayor Janey would respond. It's one thing, of course, to have our teams respond. But one thing I am not allowing my team to do is to push this narrative that there is only room in the race for one black woman. And if it does come out of my camp, I shut it down immediately.
So you would like to hear from her?
Absolutely. I think it's important that publicly that people hear that this narrative is unacceptable and that we are not a monolith and we are two separate human beings with different stories, different passions, different records of accomplishment. And now the voters deserve, of course, to know more, to learn more, and then to make an informed choice at the end of this race.
We only have 30 seconds left. I know we're hopefully coming out of the pandemic. How hard is it to run in a multi-candidate field with so many high-quality candidates when you can't touch people, literally or figuratively?
It's been challenging early on, but now that more folks are getting vaccinated, we were out there this weekend. I was door knocking. We'll do it safely, and I look forward to getting out there, of course, engaging more voters to earn their support in this race.
Andrea Campbell, it's good to see you. Thanks so much for your time. I appreciate it.
You too.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jim.